Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of the program. We're live, we're national, and I'm super blessed to be here with you this evening. Here's the phone number if you want to join me on our late night national town hall conversation, 833-482-5337, 833-4-Valdez. And I want to get into a bunch of things tonight. It's going to be a funny word that I like to use, smorgasbord. And that's just because there's not a huge story, at least in my opinion, there's not. Everything's kind of a continuing of a developing story. And there's still plenty to discuss there. But I want to start with the contention that the federal government might shut down. Now, I know I talked about this a little bit yesterday, but I continue. It's very, very important that we pay attention to this stuff. I am going to stand on my position here that I don't think government shutdowns are that bad. You can call me whatever you like, but it's not the end of the day if you can't go to a national park. Not the end of the day. And I know there's things worse than that. But ultimately, I think I've never seen a shutdown in my time that really resulted in something like the Democrats and the left within the media have portrayed. You know, like they always say things like, what about the nuclear codes? What about the air traffic control? What about? They're always crying. And I don't think there's any need for all the crying. I don't believe the DOGE cuts led to any of these things because they looked into it and they realized they did not cut any air traffic controllers. So that's not why this has happened. If anything, they haven't hired any quality air traffic controllers because they have been hiring the people they thought were best for the role, not based on experience and ability, but based on skin color. That doesn't work well. And listen, I am one of those skin color people, right? By the standard of the left, I'm brown. By my own mirror, I'm brown. But I'm the first one to tell you, please do not hire me to do brain surgery. Not because I'm brown, but because I don't know how to do brain surgery. And that's exactly why you hire a brain surgeon, based on their experience and their ability. So here we are with the threat of a government shutdown. I say bring it on. Now, I think Democrats are likely trying to weigh something. And what they're trying to weigh or poll or figure out, decipher, is if they don't go along with the continuing resolution that the House put through, will they be able to pin this on Trump? Will the people believe it? And will it help them? And as of right now, I don't believe the answer is yes. I believe the answer is no. I don't think people are going to say, can you believe it? Chuck Schumer was forced to vote against the terrible bill. And again, we've got a slight majority in the Senate. So will they try to make it a hard way to go for Trump? I suspect likely, and I also suspect likely more so in the public eye. Lots of rhetoric, lots of heated debate, lots of talk about how bad this thing is. But ultimately, is this the hill they want to die on? Do they want to pick a fight with the president? Do they really want to turn on the American people? I think they've done that, and to date, it has not worked well for them. I don't think it was a good look to focus on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. I don't think it was a good look to focus on fighting for trans men or trans women to play in women's sports. I don't think it was a good look to try and be the champion of LGBTQ issues in a country, a society where most people do not subscribe to this. And they spent, the last several years, better part of the last decade, trying to prime and condition you being the American people, the American public, to accept these things, right? Up to and including a time when trans activists were at the White House going topless. That wasn't received well. I think they pushed their envelope a little bit too far on so many occasions. Now, it didn't mean they stopped. It doesn't mean we've won the culture war. It means they've slowed down and they're reassessing because they've realized maybe it was the messenger, not the message. I think they're wrong. I think it's the message. So hopefully, while they reassess, they figure out that it was, in fact, the message, not the messenger. But while they try to figure that out, they're trying to figure out if they try to tank this CR, the continuing resolution in the Senate, will that help them in their quest against Trump? Will they say, look, we were able to do it. We had to stop Trump. He was going to go ahead, him and Elon, they were going to steal your Social Security check. They were going to do that. Do people really buy it? Now, I understand that there's a base that buys these things. I understand that there's also people that live their lives and don't listen to programs like mine. They don't care about the news. They want to live their life the way they want to live their life. And these people every now and again will tune in to what they think is the news. They might turn on Fox. They might turn on CNN. They might even just look at one of those propaganda outfits on the social media. And, like Before It's News or What's This or What's Now or one of those, that they always give you a very slanted view of the news. And I also give you a pretty slanted view of the news based on my own slant to counter their slanted view. So I get that. Right? I try to give you the news as it comes, and then I give you my opinion, which is based on my own biases towards left-wing policies, left-wing politics, the progressive movement. These are all things that I don't like. I have disdain for. I think it's bad, not good, bad, emphasizing bad with a B. So will it work? Will the Democrats be able to turn this government shutdown into something other than what it really is, which is it's not a thing? They can make it a thing. I don't think they're going to. Let's see. Let's see if I'm right or wrong. If tomorrow or whenever the deadline is, there's a government shutdown, I'll say, well, they again overplayed their hand, and I think it's going to be to their detriment. But from what I've seen and what I'm looking at, you just look at some of the things that are going on in the news. David Chalian here, CNN Washington bureau chief, he's got the results of a new CNN poll on Americans' approval of President Trump. Listen to this.
We have President Trump in our brand new poll at 45% approval. This is for his handling of his job overall, 54% disapproval. So upside down, obviously, underwater. But look at that 45% number over time for Donald Trump. In his entire first term, that was his high watermark that we had in CNN polling. It appeared in 8 years ago, March 2017, around this time in his first time around, and towards the end of his presidency, at the beginning of COVID, would rally around the president moment in May of 2020. That's when he hit 45%. He left office with a 34% approval rating in 2021. So this 45% that he's at right now, that was his actual high watermark last time around.
So the question is, does this resonate, right? Are the American people really dissatisfied with Trump in the 46, 47, 48 days that he's been in office? Or are they more upset with the current situation? I don't know the answer to that, but I would suspect, my gut tells me, that they're a lot more enthused by what is to come than they're put off by what is with this administration. And if anything, they're just reacting to some of this news. So I think the media does have a role to play. I think the Democrats do achieve some level of success when they trash Trump and Trump policies. And that's why it's important for us to know the facts and to make sure we correct the record every step of the way. And one of those things is to look at how inflation did this month. And we'll talk about that straight ahead.
This is America at Night Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, thank you, Rich, and thank you for everything. I know you very well, and I listen, but I have a lot of people that listen, and they love your show, and I appreciate it very much.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Finally, we have some good news on the economy and really the number one issue for many Americans, the cost of living. So we just learned that consumer prices in February increased by 2.8% year over year, 0.2% month over month. Both of these figures were a step in the right direction, and both were better than expected. So this is definitely very encouraging to see, because it's going to, I think, relieve some fears that inflation was perhaps re-accelerating, because this actually breaks a streak of 4 straight months where I think you could see it on the chart all the way to the right, where the inflation rate was going in the wrong direction, right? It was going higher and higher.
That is Matt Egan on CNN saying it's very encouraging to see inflation cooling. And that goes perfectly in line with the great article that's in Breitbart today. U.S. consumers get inflation relief as consumer prices rise less than expected. This is a piece by John Carney. And I said, man, I want to get into the nuts and bolts of this. So we've invited John Carney on the program, Breitbart News economics editor. He's the author of the Breitbart Business Digest. John Carney's with us. John, welcome back.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. So walk us through your piece. I think it's a very informative piece, and it kind of flies in the face of what the left has been saying.
Yeah, so we've been, probably everybody has heard a lot of this talk about how Trump was going to reignite inflation. Mm-hmm. Well, what we got in the latest inflation report was that consumer prices rose just 2.8% over the last 12 months. And the month-to-month number, so meaning what happened just from January to February, was just 0.2%. That is the smallest increase since last August. It's half of what it's less than half of the 0.5% that we saw in January. It's much better than what economists were expecting. They all got it wrong. Core prices, which exclude fuel and food because those jump around a lot, also just rose 0.2%, half of what they rose in January. So in other words, inflation went very much in the right direction. And I think that's a relief to the Trump administration because they really want inflation to come down. But it also is a relief to Americans because we've all gotten really battered by rapidly rising prices. And that really slowed down significantly in February, and that's great news.
Now, John Carney, I think this is great news. This is great news, and I feel like it is drowned out in the media. I haven't heard too much about this. I mean, I heard a little clip on CNN. I see your piece, but
I bet that guy got fired. By the way, he sounded way too happy about this. Doesn't he know that they're not allowed to be happy about the economy while Trump's president?
Well, is it the truth that everybody wants to see inflation go down? Doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on.
That's right. Although I will say that when I was watching some of the news about this and reading some of the stories that other outlets had put out, I was struck by how they tried to spin this as potentially bad news. So if inflation went up, they were going to say, oh, no, Donald Trump caused inflation. Inflation goes down, and they say, this must mean we're heading into a recession. And that's why inflation's going down. So in other words, the spin was always going to be, this is very bad for Donald Trump, no matter what happened.
Now, I agree. It's damned if you do, damned if you don't. Now, John Carney, question for you. The Doge master, the Doge father, as he's called, Elon Musk, some months ago had tweeted or retweeted somebody's comment that irrespective of who wins the November election, we're still headed towards a recession because of Biden's massive spending. And he retweeted this in the affirmative, kind of saying, sad truth or something to that effect. And this is, it's simple rules of economics that, the government spending will come home to roost. I think if you, and again, I'm not an economist, nor am I the Breitbart economics editor. So I turn to you, the expert, and I defer. But my understanding, as a simple guy that talks on radio, is if you have the government, the federal government, the Fed, right, buying up T-bills, if you have the job growth being led by government jobs that were created, and you have spending that was spent, government spending prior to Biden leaving office, all these things kind of, to me, add up to that's not going to last. And it may make your balance sheet, quote unquote, look okay. But these things will come home to roost. And in effect, I feel like that's what we're seeing now with the market volatility we're seeing. Do you think I'm off the mark, or is there any truth to this, or what?
No, I think that's exactly right. In fact, what we've seen under Joe Biden, about 85% of job growth was tied to government spending. Either was directly government jobs or jobs that I call government adjacent. So a lot of healthcare and social assistant jobs are even if they are officially private sector, are government adjacent. Plus, the Biden administration did a lot of spending to, subsidies of industries that like Green New Deal type stuff that created jobs, but were basically government jobs. We're also learning through DOGE about all these NGO jobs that were going on, so there was a tremendous amount of call it false economy out there, not really representing people serving consumer demands, but people spending taxpayer money. So yes, there will be a adjustment period. However, I don't think that necessarily has to be all that painful, in part because the private sector managed to stay somewhat strong, not as strong as it could be, but I think it's actually a little bit of a coiled spring. If we free up the private sector from too much regulation, from the threat of higher taxes, because Biden was going to enact one of the biggest tax hikes ever by letting the Trump tax hikes expire and repealing a big part of the corporate tax hikes, I think that that the economy is waiting for the opportunity to grow through the private sector rather than the government sector. And so, yes, there is a bit of a hangover from too much government spending, but we had too little private investment, and I think that's going to come back and only probably, I can never guarantee that we won't have a recession, but probably keep us from a downturn.
Yeah, okay. And that's pretty good, because I know that and I feel the same way. I can't, I'm not in your shoes, and I know half of what you know, if that. But I look at what's going on, and I see Trump bringing in Sunbank and others to invest big sums of money into America. And it tells me that if these things can pan out, we could potentially get more investment, which can stave off this potential recession. But we have to be able to create jobs quickly and kind of infuse our economy with cash and allay some of the fears that people are displaying in the market. Otherwise, it kind of looks like the last couple of days. So
I think that's right. I think if we don't get the tax cuts passed and we don't get the regulation done, the deregulation done, then we're in a lot of trouble.
Well, let's pick up right there with deregulation and tax cuts, because I think that's important. Folks, we're coming right back with John Carney, Breitbart News economics editor, and me, Rich Valdez, coming right back. Don't go anywhere.
You, of course, have a track record now. People have heard you, and they know that, in fact, you've got the goods. You have the talent, and you have the ability to do a superb job.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
President Trump imposed sweeping new 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imported into the U.S. That means everything from cars to washing machines, lamps, and even canned goods could go up in price, and many small businesses now bracing for rising cost. On Tuesday, President Trump backed down from a threat to impose an additional 25% in tariffs to Canada, totaling 50% after Ontario said it would put a tariff on electricity coming into the U.S. Ultimately, Ontario Premier Doug Ford held off on retaliatory electricity tariffs, saying cooler heads should prevail, but still reminded Americans who was to blame.
Consumer confidence is down. The market's tumbling. There's going to be plants closed in the U.S. Assembly plants will shut down because they won't have the aluminum, or they'll be paying 3 times as much. This is absolute chaos created by one person, and that's Donald Trump.
President Trump dismissing the turmoil, now saying he does not see the possibility of a recession.
Mr. President, when you look at the market selling off, that didn't concern you, and
Nope,
where do you see it
doesn't
going?
concern me. I think some people are going to make great deals by buying stocks and bonds.
Instead, he expressed support and compassion for Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, whose Tesla stock has tanked 39% so far this year. Consumers could be bracing for more pain, with Canada also saying they could restrict oil and minerals coming into the U.S. if the trade war escalates. Nicole D'Antonio, ABC News, Washington.
So we're talking about the economy, and we're having a very robust conversation with our guest, John Carney, Breitbart News economics editor and the author of the Breitbart Business Digest. And John Carney, you heard the report there from ABC News with respect to tariffs and whatnot, both the Prime Minister in Ontario's comments and President Trump's comments. And I want to weave that into where you left off with talking about rolling back regulations, because I think that is a big part of this. Without the regulations and allowing the Trump tax cuts to expire and keeping those in play, we are in effect avoiding a tax hike. John Carney.
That's right. We would have had one of the most massive tax hikes in American history if the Trump tax cuts were allowed to expire. And amazingly, the Biden administration was not satisfied with that. They were going to allow the tax cuts to expire, and then they were going to go after some of the corporate tax cuts that were made permanent. This would have been an economic disaster. It is incumbent, however, I have to say, on the Republicans to move very quickly. The longer that they wait to extend and make permanent the individual tax cuts, which we call them individual tax cuts, but they are also the tax rates that small businesses in the U.S. pay. The longer they wait on that, the more danger there is that people start to worry that they're going to get this tax hike. The worry that you're going to get a tax hike affects your behavior today, which then can lead to an economic slump.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And, I look at, when I look at the economy, I use very simple analyses like the rules of supply and demand and my own experience as a small business owner. And, when you run a small business, you learn everything the hard way, right? It doesn't matter what the fancy terminology is. You figure things out quickly. And I quickly learned as a very young man in business for myself that I wasn't in business for myself. I had a partner named Uncle Sam, and he took nearly half. And I hated that. I love this country, but I hated my illegal partner there, taking, more than a third. Anywhere from a third to half, which really is upsetting. And it remains the case. So I think people are going to be happy about the Trump tax cuts going into effect, even if they don't realize it, that it's going to be saving the money and avoiding this tax hike. But let's talk about this this report that we just heard, because I feel like this is also misunderstood. This concept of fair trade and correcting trade imbalances and tariffs. And I think in history, whether it was Hoover or others, we've seen tariffs and we've seen how they can work and how they sometimes don't work. And I feel like Trump uses them as a very strategic tool, but it is the only way to grow, right? And I look at an analogy like the gym. I started going to the gym about a year ago, and you really don't get muscles if you don't work out and eat right and drink a lot of water and get a lot of rest. And there's a whole formula to it. And I think this is the same way. And I think Trump did start taking steps toward that on day one, but it's not necessarily something you're going to see on day one.
That's right. It does take time to happen. I think a lot of people really misunderstand the way tariffs will work and the way Donald Trump thinks about tariffs. So he thinks about them in a very complex way, but it really can be boiled down to three simple points. One is we can use tariffs as diplomacy. We can force other countries who want access to our markets to comply with things we need them to do. So this is what's happened with Canada and Mexico. We said, we need your help on the border. Help us. They said, well, we don't know if we want to. Okay, we're going to give you a 25% tariff. And then they say, okay, we'll help out. So that's diplomacy. And that's really important. The other thing they can be used for is to get other countries to give us fair terms of trade. So other countries have these tariffs that they put on our goods that make it so that we have a lot of trouble. American businesses make things, try to go over to Europe and sell it, and there's a huge tariff on it. That's a problem. So the reciprocal tariffs Trump has proposed says, we're just going to match you. If you guys raise your tariffs, our tariffs will go up also. If you lower your tariffs, though, then our tariffs will go down. It could actually be a path to pretty free trade if other countries respond by lowering their tariffs. And if they raise their tariffs, they have more to lose than we do because they need our market. We don't have their markets right now. We're already locked out largely. So we won't suffer as much as they will when they lose access to our markets. And then the third reason is we do have strategic things that we absolutely need to protect. You cannot be the United States, the arsenal of democracy and freedom for the world, if you don't have a steel industry, if you don't have an aluminum industry, if you are dependent on China for high technology goods, you need copper. So all of these things are necessary. We need to make sure that we have secured production either here at home, or really just here at home, because if we're dependent on other countries to supply those and they decide they don't want to anymore, we're at their mercy. We've given them a veto over America's policies.
Really well put. John Carney, I think that's spot on. Now, a lot of people suspect that this effort to stave off a recession and, for lack of better words, I'm going to say, get a lot of the junk out of our system that we've, the government bought T-bonds, the government spending, everything that we've seen to kind of artificially prop up the economy from the Biden days. It's going to take a little bit for this to kind of flush its way through, and we'll see some market instability as a result. But we'll eventually get to a place where the tariffs begin to normalize, where people say it doesn't make sense to go to war with the United States in a trade war, maybe but for China and the others that think they can endure. I don't think it's Canada. What do you think? Do you think Canada wants to have a sustained trade war with the United States?
No, they definitely don't. They absolutely need to maintain an open market with the U.S. They're going to have to start to have a better deal. They have these crazy tariffs on things like American cheese that really penalize our dairy and milk. Our dairy farmers get really hurt by Canada's tariffs. We're just saying, guys, cut it out. We should be friends. We should be neighbors. We'll sell you stuff. You sell us stuff. Let us get along. They will come along on this. They do not. Look, we saw this already, where initially they tried to react to Trump's tariffs by saying, we are going to raise the price of electricity, and if you keep going, we will cut off electricity that we supply to Michigan, to New York, to Minnesota. And Trump said, okay, fine. The tariffs just went up from 25 to 50%. And then they backed down because they realized he wasn't bluffing. Sometimes you get if you're playing cards, you get called and you have to show your hand. What Trump did is say, he loves to use the analogy, right? I have the cards. Here you go. And they said, okay, that's it, right? I'm out. And they backed down. I think that's what we're going to see. And the fact that Trump got Canada to back down on the electricity surcharge is a lesson to the rest of the world. And I think this is very important. And one of the reasons they just did this was to demonstrate that we're not bluffing, that we are going to carry through with this. So that should make Europe and India and Japan think a little bit about whether they really want to try to answer our tariffs with higher tariffs of their own, or say, yeah, you know what? Let's try to level the playing field here.
Right. Don't play chicken if you don't think you can win. I get that. So with that all being said, how long do you think it takes for us to get past this hiccup or this getting this junk out of the system? A month, 2 months, 6 months? Your thoughts?
I think we're in it for a year. I think we will have to see that one. It will take some what Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has called a detox period, where we are weaning the economy from its addiction to government money, and we're moving it away from there. There was definitely some malinvestment that went on, money that shouldn't have been spent where it was, that should have gone into other areas. And it's always costly when you have to shift the economy because financing has been misdirected. So that'll be painful. We will have these trade fights because countries will want to see whether we're serious or not. And they may even have to feel a little pain in their own economies for their own people to say, remember, they have special interests in Germany and in France. The people of France really don't benefit from their structure. It's really the elites in their country who want things set up this way. Same thing with China, by the way. The Chinese people are horribly treated by the Chinese system. It doesn't work for them any more than it does for us, but their elites control things. In democratic countries, though, like France and Germany, I think you will see the politicians eventually cave and give way to what's good for their people, which means playing nice with the United States.
Yeah, I think that's really well put. John Carney is the economics editor at Breitbart and the author of the Breitbart Business Digest. Let everybody know how they can, access all of your work and follow you.
Sure. So on X, I am at Carney, Carney. Got my last name. I signed up early.
Cool.
And yeah, I was just very lucky. Had some cool techie friends. If you go to Breitbart.com, you can click on newsletters, subscribe. It's free. It comes out every day, straight to your inbox, to the Breitbart Business Digest. It's on our website, the Breitbart. We have a whole economics section. I write a ton that doesn't even show up in the digest, right on there. Basically, we cover all the big economic news. If you want to know what's going on with inflation, tomorrow we're going to have the producer price index. Today we have the consumer price index. On Friday we'll have consumer sentiment. I cover all of this, and then with the Breitbart Business Digest, I tell you what it means and what's going to happen next.
Well, make sure, everybody listening, make sure you get a copy of this stuff and follow him at Breitbart.com and check under the authors section for John Carney. John Carney, you are a gentleman, a scholar, and a patriot, and I thank you for being here.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
You bet. And amigos, we continue with your thoughts, your calls, and so much more straight ahead.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
Listen, I like your show. It's the best night show there is. I think you got the best spirit, the best emotions. You're real. You're really a good guy.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. Rich Valdez live with you till midnight, 1 a.m. in some areas of the country. And I want to, again, thank you for letting me be in your homes, in your cars, on your airwaves. It's always a pleasure. It's an honor to be with you. And I want to, again, invite you to call 833-4-VALDEZ if you want to chime in, and we're going to get to your calls in a moment. But I wanted to also just talk a little bit about the other stories that are going on in the world, right? Because there's a few things out there today. We agreed to a ceasefire yesterday. Russia seems like they're a little bit upset with the ceasefire. And I think that's to be expected, right? You're always going to have that. You've got Chuck Schumer, again, doubling down, saying that Democrats are going to block the spending bill. And again, if they do, I'd love your thoughts as well. When you call in, let me know your thoughts on this. Do you think they're going to be able to blame all of this on Trump? If Democrats vote no in the negative, can they turn around and make it someone else's fault for something they voted against? I don't know if that's the case or not, but I want to get your thoughts on it for sure, because people are definitely sounding the alarms on that one. And there's a few other things we're going to get to, but let's hit the phones. Let's go to Paul. Paul is our buddy in Boise, Idaho on KBOI. Paul, your thoughts.
Thanks for taking my call, Rich. Appreciate it. Great show. Great show. My thoughts are, who had 12 years out of 16 possible to get us into the mess that we're in? Think about that for just a second is all it takes. The Dems, they got us into this mess, not Trump. Think about it. Trump had maybe 2.5 years with the way they treated him and all the shenanigans they were pulling on him. He almost couldn't even be a president the way they treated him. So if you want to blame somebody, blame the Dems. It's obvious who did it. As far as getting out of the short-term problem, I think that Trump's going about it right. I'm not 100% sure on the tariffs, but he's trying to do what he can to temper the inflation. You pump too much money into this economy, and the inflation's going to go skyrocketing again. So this he's like a Carl Walenda. He's above the city of New York on a little wire with a big pole in his hand, and he's rocking back and forth, playing the wind, trying to get on the other side. And you got to give the guy credit. I mean, he's not Superman, but I'm thinking about getting my seamstress sew a cape for the guy, because he's doing everything that he possibly can to try to get us through this mess that the Dems put us in the first place.
Yeah. Well, listen, Paul, I think you're spot on there. The newest member of the Flying Walendas. That's so funny. And I think you're right. Look, it's interesting to see how the media will continually just try to put this on. The Democrats will try to put it on him. But ultimately, I think people will see how things improve. And, I know I went to get gas the other day and I said, oh, wow, look, gas is a little cheaper. A couple of people called in mentioning the same thing here on this program. So I think we're going to begin to see these things. And as these things become more evident in our pocketbook, we should expect for the attacks on Trump to be ratcheted up that much more. Paul, thank you. Shout out to KBOI. We're going to take a pause right here, come back with some additional thoughts and maybe some more of your calls. 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
President Trump today making some interesting comments in the Oval Office. Obviously, a big, wide-ranging conversation that he had, covering so many different topics. One of them being that while he's accompanied by the Prime Minister of Ireland, that Schumer is a Palestinian. Listen to this.
These people are sick. They don't know what's happening in the real world. The Democrats have to get their act together. And if they don't vote, then what you're going to do is you're going to have taxes that are going to go through the roof. You're going to have a very bad time. You're going to have some very bad things happen, and people are going to blame the Democrats. And Schumer is a Palestinian as far as I'm concerned. He's become a Palestinian. He used to be Jewish. He's not Jewish anymore. He's a Palestinian.
I had to throw that one in there because it was too good to not end the show on that one. Hasta la próxima, folks. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez, America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to the Wednesday night edition of our program. We're live, we're national, looking to speak with you, the American people. Give us a call, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. It's about 7 minutes past 10 p.m. here in the East Coast, New York City area, and I don't know where to start. I guess President Trump meeting with the Prime Minister of Ireland today in the White House, talking about a range of topics, honestly, a really wide range that I really appreciate. And one of the things he mentioned was how America needed someone to defend America and how angry he is at the last 4 years of the Biden administration. I got to tell you, what Trump said here really sounds like what so many people I know say to me every day, or said to me every day over the last 4 years. Listen to this, cut two.
This country needed somebody to defend it. It's this big, beautiful place that was being ripped off by illegal immigrants coming in from prisons, coming in from mental institutions, gang members, gang leaders, drug dealers, pouring into our country with the open borders. I am so angry at the last 4 years of what they've done to our country, what they've done to this country between inflation, but maybe the most that bothers me is that they would allow millions of people to come into our country that are stone cold murderers, killers, drug dealers, the worst gang members, the worst people allowed into our country. And we're now getting them out. We're going to get them out. We're getting them out. I want to thank Tom Homan, by the way. He's doing a great job. And I want to thank Kristi Noem, who's doing a fantastic job. This is a job that's so unnecessary. This should have never happened.
I agree with him, right? I don't think we needed an auditor in the Department of Government Efficiency. I think everybody operates with the expectation that the government is going to do their best to be efficient. The reason that we have a representative democracy in this republic that we live in is because we believe that we're voting for someone that's either A, willing to do something we're not willing to do and work in government and be an administrator of the public good, or B, has some level of expertise that lends itself well to that position. Right? There's a reason I work in radio and not in Congress. And maybe one day, people ask me a lot, believe it or not. I don't know why. I don't know why they would ask me, honestly, because I think I say I'm not the most bombastic host on radio. I try to be somewhat measured, and I try to not get emotional and try to stay logical. But that doesn't mean I don't get emotional. Doesn't mean I don't fly off the handle. And doesn't mean that I'm not quick to lose my hot head either. And just imagine that, I'm the guy. You bring me on your team, I'm the guy that might ruin, the history in Congress of, they went from debate to fisticuffs. Right? I don't want that to be me. So I don't know. Or I might say something snarky inside the House chambers that would be deemed inappropriate, which I could see me saying. So all that to be said, I think there's a reason why we elect these people to go in there and to be our legislators and our representatives, our mayors, our city council people, etc. And we expect them to be the arbiter of all that's good and holy in many ways. I'm not looking for them to be a priest or a pastor, but do the right thing by the tax dollar, do the right thing by the taxpayer. And Trump's right when he says this was not necessary. We didn't need a Department of Government Efficiency until we needed one. And I'm glad we have one today because we've got people that are out there for themselves, for their own special interests, and for things that don't align with the greater good of America. Right? If you're the minority leader in the United States Senate and your name is Chuck Schumer, why on earth would you present an option like this? Let's shut down the government. Now, listen, he's preaching to the choir here. I've never met a government shutdown I didn't love. But why is he talking about it? Why is he looking to shut down the government other than his own personal gain? Because every other time, he was always against the shutdowns. We have to, he focused on the continuity of government, making sure the swamp, which is addicted to your tax dollars, was getting their fix of tax dollars. So what's the change in heart? Well, let's listen to Chuck Schumer.
Funding the government should be a bipartisan effort, but Republicans chose a partisan path, drafting their continuing resolution without any input from congressional Democrats. Because of that, Republicans do not have the votes in the Senate to invoke cloture on the House CR. Our caucus is unified on a clean April 11th CR that will keep the government open and give Congress time to negotiate bipartisan legislation that can pass. We should vote on that. I hope our Republican colleagues will join us to avoid a shutdown on Friday.
Avoiding a shutdown. Well, sir, if you're the one voting no, how are you going to get it passed? Now, I guess he's trying to play hardball. This is what they do, right? It's exactly what Trump does with the tariffs. He's saying, look, if you guys want to avoid a shutdown, you're going to give us a lot more of what we want in spending. Okay, I got it. So you want your friend John Thune and everybody else in the Senate to play ball with you. And if you have the cards, then you have them. If you don't, you don't. And you can't let the Democrats and their incessant need to feed on your tax dollars continue, right? So somebody's going to have to put their foot down. And if it takes a government shutdown and John Thune standing up and saying, all right, Chuck, we did everything we could. We've done absolutely everything possible to work with you, but what you're asking for is unreasonable. It goes against the mandate that the president received by way of the American people to do better. And therefore, this is the impasse we've reached, and any government shutdown is on you. The length of time that the government shut is on you and the Democrats, and you'll be accountable to the American people. And in that same day, his leadership fund, his friends in the PAC that support the Senate, whatever it's called, the NRSL, the National Senatorial Leadership Committee, whatever it is, all of them, every last person that raises $1 needs to release an ad that day, making sure that every last American knows that Chuck Schumer is holding the American government hostage for his own spending needs. And that's it. And put it right back on them. And let us enjoy all of the savings that go along with a shutdown government. A shutdown government can't spend. It spends less. And that's where I am with that. So hopefully that's the case. Now, there's some talk. A whole lot of talk about what is going on in, of all places, the Arctic. Right? China's after the Arctic. Russia is not that far from the Arctic. You got the United States that has interest there. Everybody wants to be involved. There's all sorts of theories about what's going on up there in Antarctica. And people have an interest. Now, the U.S. Geological Survey estimates that the Arctic contains 15% of the world's untapped oil reserves and a whopping 30% of the world's undiscovered natural gas. Now, we have a ton of natural gas in the United States, but we also made a good amount of money with that, and we could make more money with that. So what will happen with the Arctic? Well, we're going to get to the bottom of that straight ahead, because there's a lot that's going on up there, and everybody wants some of these critical resources. So I want to have a conversation about American energy and how we're going to get there, and how our current situation is going with energy production, and will we get to a place where we're energy dominant again? All of that is straight ahead. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
God bless you, because literally I think you represent, the new voice of America. What you say is what people are listening to.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
The Arctic is the next global battleground. Who will dominate? The Arctic is warming 4 times faster than the rest of the world. This opens up critical rare earth elements and new trade routes. Ship activity has surged by 37% in the last decade. Russia is reopening Soviet-era bases and developing hypersonic missiles. China is expanding its presence through scientific exploration and military cooperation. Finland and Sweden joining NATO strengthens the alliance's Arctic hold. The U.S. is securing alliances and signing defense agreements like the Critical Minerals Agreement with Norway. By 2030, the Arctic will decide the next superpower. Who will win?
That's a clip from worldinsight.com that kind of sums up the, I'm going to call it an arms race for what happens in the Arctic. And I think this is important because of the untapped potential that we have in the Arctic. But like you would suspect that a Puerto Rican kid from Brooklyn doesn't know too much about the Arctic, you're right, I don't. That's why I want to bring in Bob Griffin. He's a board member of Future 49, which promotes American energy security, independence, and dominance. And he's with us now to discuss. Bob Griffin, welcome.
Hey, Rich, good to be on with you. Thanks for taking me.
You bet. Absolutely. And I'm interested in this because I think I've heard this before, right? I think for years we've heard about exploration in the Arctic, but for years it's always been, I feel like something that, people aspire to, or they do a little bit, but it's never, the main agenda item. But I think in a time such as now, where energy seems to be more paramount than usual, this might be the right time. Tell us what's going on.
Well, I think it is the right time, and kind of an addendum to my opinion piece that I had in the Washington Times. I think it's a time to also be optimistic about the race in the Arctic, especially with the new administration. Under the previous administration, the folks up here in Alaska, and that's where I do live, up here in Alaska. My family's been up here since 1899, and we've always been a resource development state, and we've been under huge sanctions, essentially by the Biden administration prior, that has kind of shut down Alaska. Even one of the Willow project, the one oil project that was opened up and celebrated a little bit, and the Biden administration opened it up only because they thought they would lose in court if they didn't open it up. But it's for perspective of the folks down in the lower 48, it's a tiny area that has a huge amount of restrictions. That basically it's about a little bit less than a tenth of the size of the JFK Airport in New York City, in the National Petroleum Reserve, which is a little bit bigger, I think, than the state of Indiana. So just from some of those perspectives, a lot of the hits we get up here in Alaska is that we want to destroy a paradise, which Alaska is, and we have some beautiful untouched land. But the areas that we want to develop are actually pretty small and pretty remote. And we're really advocating for strength in the Arctic to be able to exploit and defend the Arctic. But in order to do those type of things, you have to have resources, and one of the byproducts of affluence is having those resources available. So we're excited about Alaska now being open for business from some of the executive orders that have come down the pipe, and some focus and basically overturning some of the sanctions that were created by the previous administration. Because Alaska has the workforce in place, we have the infrastructure in place, and we have key military installations that can be beefed up and strengthened. And because again, the thinning ice sheets, the transit time for ships that go from like the East Coast to the West Coast and not have to be stacked up in the Panama Canal saves about 4,500 nautical mile difference, and can be hundreds of thousands of dollars in fuel savings taking that northern route. Americans were a little bit behind in that generally a lot of time of year it takes an icebreaker to break a path for other commercial vessels through that route. And the Russians are definitely beating us to the punch on that. I think we have 5 active icebreakers in the United States fleet, all run by the United States Coast Guard, and most of them are about half the size of the big nuclear-powered Russian icebreakers, which I think they have about 57 in their inventory right now.
Let's talk a little bit about the competition that the U.S. faces in Alaska and in the Arctic overall with respect to China and Russia, and who are some of the other global competitors that we're up against?
Well, primarily, what's raised our eyebrows recently is the cooperation between China and Russia. China and Russia have been doing joint exercises with warships operating quite close to the coastline in Alaska, and we've had some intercepts, not yet under the Trump administration, but for the Biden administration, we've been challenged both by Chinese and Russian bombers in our air defense identification zone, and that's kind of my old vocation. I'm an old retired Air Force pilot, and mostly a Cold War guy. And during the Cold War, we used
Thank you for your service.
Intercept. Well, it was a great privilege, but during the Cold War, it was pretty frequently we would intercept Russian fighters and bombers in the air defense identification zone in Alaska, and that kind of cooled off for quite a while. We still do maintain pretty robust resources, F-22s and F-35s up here in Alaska. But recently, back in July, we had intercepts of not only Russian but Chinese bombers that were nuclear capable, probing in our air defense identification zone, and that's a new trend that we hadn't seen recently, and are interested to discourage that behavior, and by having adequate military forces up here. And again, I'm not with trillions of dollars in national debt. I'm not advocating that we spend more money that we don't have, but by developing the resources that are not only in hydrocarbons, but Alaska has 49 of the 50 most highly sought after rare earth elements that are in known deposits in Alaska that are critical for our industry and our defense industries. The strong defense and a good economy are byproducts of the affluence that come with being able to develop those resources. And again, I tip my cap to the current administration in that they've really have opened us up for business. We realize there are going to be there will be tons of litigation that follow. There always is, but Alaskans, we're used to dealing with that and getting what we can in the end.
Bob Griffin, board member at Future 49. They promote American energy security, independence, and dominance. Check out his op-ed in the Washington Times. Bob Griffin, I want to thank you for being here. I appreciate it, sir. Godspeed.
Godspeed.
You bet. Amigos, we come back. Your thoughts, your calls, and more on what's going on in America at night with me, Rich Valdez. Don't go anywhere.
That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-Valdez. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And, of course, your thoughts, calls, and opinions are welcome on everything we're discussing tonight. From the race for the Arctic, what's going on in Alaska with energy production and independence, as well as everything else that's been happening, the economy, tariffs, the resurgence of the economy, inflation, cooling, and so much more. But I want to talk about the border, right? Because we don't talk about the border anymore. Why? Because Trump has effectively shut it down. And so many of the problems associated with the border have been resolved, yet the media forgets about that conveniently, and they want to yell about the price of eggs. But yesterday we discovered the price of eggs is down. Today I had lunch with a dear friend, and she was telling me about, she's like, I don't know. She's like, I don't understand. I turn on the news, Richie, and all I see are people complaining about the price of eggs. And she's like, I don't understand why they're yelling at Trump about this. She said the price of eggs has been up for the last several years when Biden was in office, and nobody complained then. Why are they complaining now? And she said, and not for anything. She's like, but I like to buy the organic, cage-free, blah, blah, blah. She's like, they're $5.49 at some organic market she goes to. And she's like, that's not a lot of money, I think, for the, the good eggs is what she called them. And she didn't care. She was like, I like steak. I like eggs. I don't complain if the price of steak goes up. She's like, yeah, we're all paying a little bit more, but that's been, what's going on with inflation. And she seemed, not thrilled by it, but somewhat like, yeah, it's par for the course. So what's the big to-do with eggs? And did Trump effectively shut it down yesterday? I think he did. I think the border is something that has been effectively shut down as well, where we don't hear a whole lot about that. And effectively, we've got the border that is shut down, and now it's kind of a non-issue. Well, the Trump administration has taken a little spin on things here with turning the CBP One app, which is what the Biden administration used to admit people bypassing ports of entry, and just basically get on this app and come in, making it quote unquote legal for them to entry as an asylum seeker. And they've turned it on its head, and they're calling it CBP Home. Now, I mentioned this yesterday, but there was a report in Fox News that I want to play for you, where it explains how this has been, in effect, turned around. And you now have the Trump administration using this for people to be able to self-deport. Now, I think this is a very, very great option, because there's a lot of people that are in the country now that don't necessarily even want to stick around, right? Not the least of which is one of the aides to my least favorite congresswoman from the Bronx and Queens, AOC. AOC says that one of her aides, her top aides, is now self-deporting after 23 years as an illegal alien. This is in Breitbart from yesterday. Listen to this. An illegal alien who worked as Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's deputy communications director says he has self-deported to Colombia. I love Colombia, by the way. Diego de la Vega was born in Quito, Ecuador, and was 7 years old when he entered the United States. Then he overstayed a visitor's visa for 23 years living in New York City, which is a sanctuary city. In an interview with an outlet called Migrant Insider, De La Vega says that while growing up, we lived in fear because we were not of the right status. But I had a pretty good childhood in New York City. We worked hard, starting out in a basement apartment, but we went to school and we got jobs. The former illegal alien says his political activism began with the DREAM Act in 2010. After it failed to pass into law, he started organizing for immigrant rights, and then as a communications worker in the New York State Assembly, then for Make the Road New York as an immigrant rights organizer. And then it all came together. So this guy, what I don't understand is how are you from Ecuador and get deported to Colombia? And can somebody deport me to Puerto Rico, please? Because it's nice this time of year. Anyway, De La Vega wanted to work on Capitol Hill. Thankfully, only legal citizens are allowed to work in national politics, which seems like a pretty smart law, because here is the bottom line about this DACA recipient, or tried to be a DACA recipient. And it goes on and on. It gets a little into the weeds here. Doesn't answer my question about Colombia in this piece. But I think it's interesting that even AOC's people, her own top aide here, has deported himself. And my question is, did he use the CBP app or did he not? How did he go about this this self-deportation? I don't know. Now, in other news related to the what I'm talking about, there's a CBP official that has been accused of some misconduct. And I think we have some audio on that. Or do we have that, Count Delacula? Okay, let us go to that. Listen to this.
The Trump administration has taken that controversial CBP One cell phone app for migrants that the Biden administration was using, and they've repurposed it into a self-deportation app that is officially launching today. The app is now called CBP Home. It allows illegal aliens in the U.S. to register to self-deport. They fill out biographical information, including their countries of citizenship, which country they plan to return to, their alien registration numbers, their contact information, and it allows them to upload photos of themselves to confirm their identity. All of it is then submitted to CBP, and they leave the country. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why would an illegal immigrant want to self-deport? Well, DHS says if they leave now, they will have the opportunity to return to the U.S. legally in the future and chase the American dream. But if they don't leave, they will be found, arrested, detained, and deported with a permanent ban on entry into the United States. In a statement to Fox News, DHS Secretary Kristi Noem said in part, quote, the Biden administration exploited the CBP One app to allow more than 1 million aliens to illegally enter the United States. With the launching of the CBP Home app, we are restoring integrity to our immigration system. If they don't self-deport, we will find them, deport them, and they will never return. The Biden administration's use of the CBP One app allowed more than 40,000 migrants to come into the U.S. at a port of entry every single month. That totaled nearly 1 million migrants by the end of his presidency. President Trump terminated that app immediately upon taking office. And DHS tells me that any migrants who had that CBP One app on their phone will see it automatically update to this new self-deportation app starting today. And DHS can also use the data from the prior CBP One registrations to track migrants for removal. So in a nutshell, Trump just took Biden's program, which was bringing migrants in, and has now totally repurposed it to get them out.
So again, that's a report from Fox News, Bill Malugin. And again, that's my thinking is this is how AOC's aide decided to self-deport so that maybe he could come back and be in the country at another time. But going back to what I was mentioning about CBP, there's a Customs and Border Protection director in Michigan that's been accused of running a scheme to defraud the FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, after a series of floods damaged her own home in 2023. The Department of Justice unsealed a criminal complaint against 55-year-old Serena Baker Hill on Wednesday, that's today, charging her with engaging in a scheme to defraud FEMA and lying to federal agents. Ms. Baker Hill is a career employee with CBP, and she's the director of CBP's Center for Excellence and Expertise over Automotive and Aerospace Engineering. Well, I didn't even know they had such a thing. Now we know. And now we know what she's doing. Following efforts with our interagency partners, is a quote from Kash Patel. Following efforts from our interagency partners, I can report that a career director-level employee at U.S. Customs and Border Protection has been charged with allegedly attempting to defraud FEMA, as well as lying to federal agents. And that was, again, FBI Director Kash Patel with a post on X. This is part of the FBI's new and renewed efforts to crack down on public corruption and deliver accountability for the American people. Justice will be done. Thanks to our partners, Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Justice Department, and the FBI team in Detroit for their work. So that's what's going on with Ms. Baker Hill and this particular person. So that's what's happening on the CBP front. Straight ahead, we're going to continue talking about a couple of things, plus your calls. We've got your calls and more, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
I'm so glad to be on your show, Rich. It's just an amazing broadcast that I hope the rest of America listens to every day.
America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
There's a lot of concern for a lot of Americans right now about the state of the economy. President Trump has refused to rule out a recession. Secretary Lutnick, however, has told us there will not be one. So can the White House just tell and assure Americans today that there's not going to be a recession?
Well, there's a lot to unpack there. So let me start by saying that, first of all, when it comes to the stock market, the numbers that we see today, the numbers we saw yesterday, the numbers we'll see tomorrow are a snapshot of a moment in time. And as President Trump has said, and I'm here to echo the remarks of this president, of this White House, we are in a period of economic transition. We are in a period of transition from the mess that was created under Joe Biden in the previous administration. Joe Biden left this country in an economic disaster.
Joe Biden left this country in an economic disaster. I agree with that. Your thoughts? Let's go to the phones. 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Eric, Janesville, Wisconsin on WLS. Eric, go right ahead.
How you doing, Rich?
Wonderful, thank you.
Okay, I apologize for calling you Jesse, your screener. I don't know why. Anyway.
Yeah, I wouldn't have known about that had you not said anything. Go right ahead, sir.
Well, whatever. Yeah, a couple of days ago, the White House press secretary said, and I think you can verify this, said that the country being tariffed pays the tariff. Well, that's simply not true. And I think
Says
you know
who?
that. The importer pays the tariff and passes it on to the buyer.
Well, no, that's optional. Let's just say, listen to what I'm saying. Let's say I want to sell hats and I want to make my hats in China. And I buy these hats from China, but now Trump says, well, we're levying a 10% tariff. And now we're going to 20%. Right? And I have customers that buy my hats in the United States, but now the hats have a tariff on them. I can turn around and say, hey, Eric in Janesville, the hats are going to cost you 20% more now because Trump's tariffs. But you could turn around and say, I'm pretty good paying the rate I've been paying because that's what I sell to my customers at. So the question becomes, who pays the tariff? It's not automatic that you're going to pass this on to the consumer because you may not want to lose your business, right? I may not want to lose Eric from Janesville. So I may say, damn, I'm now eating 20% of my cost here, of my profit, because I have to eat this. Otherwise, I could tell him, well, it's going to go up 5% and I'm going to eat 15%, right? So there's a negotiation that goes on. But if I turn to all of my customers and I say, hey, listen, I'm going to have to, we're getting tariffed now because we get these hats from China. I can turn to you and say, well, or Eric from Janesville can turn around and say, well, thank you so much for the hats that you sell us, but I'm no longer interested because at a 20% premium for 10% more, I can buy the American-made hat from Richardson, which is an American company that makes hats, and I'm going to go with them. So the question of does it get passed on to the consumer is really a question of the importer.
I understand what you're saying, Rich. I get it. But my point was, just from a strict fact point, whoever gets tariffed, say it's Canada, China, Europe, whatever, they don't pay the tariff. That's all I was trying to say. And they don't. And you know that, right?
Oh, yes. I understand what you're saying. You're saying if you're putting a tax on China,
It's whomever is importing from China to the United States that's paying the tariff. And yeah, that's accurate. So if that's an American company or be it a Chinese company operating with an operations in China, I get it. Yes, it's the person bringing it in, that person doing the deal that's going to do that. And my understanding of what you were saying was, who gets the end of the the crappy end of the stick. And I think that part remains to be seen. And ultimately, and I think when it comes to China, I think they do eat a lot of this. I don't see prices on. There's this big website that they operate called Temu, and another one called Shein. These things, I haven't seen prices jump up dramatically on these websites, and they're constantly being fed to me on my social media feeds. And I think the reason for that is their markup is very high, and they make a lot of money. Even though they do a lot of wholesale, I think they still make a lot of money, and they're not willing to lose the U.S. business that they have over a 10 or 20% tariff. So maybe they might notch things up a tad, but I don't think they're notching them up the full 20% on a lot of things, because that ultimately would be the thing. And again, I didn't hear, to your point, I didn't hear Levitt's comments that we're levying, that the foreign government pays the actual tariff tax. But I think it's safe to say what was meant was the tariff is levied on that country. And if you're doing business with that country, then you're going to pay that tariff. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. And thanks for the clarification. Eric in Janesville, Wisconsin, listening on WLS. And the rest of your calls and more, Pennsylvania, Florida, Canada, New York, and more. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, to the phones we go. Let's see, who do we got here? We've got Gavin, Rochester, New York, WGDJ, Paul Vandenberg country. Go right ahead. All right, Gavin, speak up. All right, we're going to go to Eduardo. Eduardo's in Tampa, Florida, streaming the show. Eduardo?
Yeah. Good evening, Rich. Can you hear me?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I have a Shelton Snow. He's with the Black Coalition of Federal Aviation Employees.
Mm-hmm.
This is in Daily Mail. They have him on tape where he has answers to the air traffic controller's exam. And there's an eyewitness called Matthew Douglas. He's a member of organization NBCFAE. He knows.
So basically, you're saying that people are giving out the answers so that people of color or others that are not qualified to apply for these jobs, because that's who they're trying to hire, because there's an emphasis on that. Listen, it doesn't surprise me. The DEI stuff is disgraceful, and honestly, it's an insult, right? If somebody were to tell me, the only reason you're there is because they needed a Hispanic guy in the company, which is a lie, right? One Hispanic guy in the whole company, right? It would be an insult to my ability as a broadcaster. And I think that everybody should look at things that way. We got to put the people that are good for the job in the job they've got. Eduardo in Tampa, Florida, thanks for the call, brother. I appreciate that. Shout out to richvaldez.com, where he's streaming from. Joni in Pittsburgh, Peter in Montreal. Hang on, we're coming to you right in the next hour. Folks, it's Rich Valdez. We continue with another hour straight ahead. And if this is the end of the road for you, hasta la próxima. Take care. God bless you, and good night, America. I'm Rich Valdez.
Live from the city that never sleeps. 17 miles from Madison Square Garden, New York City. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez. America's favorite late-night talk program, featuring interesting guests from around the world and calls from across America. And now, here is your host, Rich Valdez.
Hi there, good evening, and what's up, America? I am Rich Valdez, Valdez with an S, at Rich Valdez on all of the social media. Welcome to our Wednesday night program. We are live, we're national, blessed to be here. And give me a call if you want to join the program, 833-482-5337, 833-4-VALDEZ. And Democrats remain in an uproar over the continuing resolution, over DOGE, the Department of Government Efficiency, over Trump's success. And Americans seem to be on board with a lot of what Trump is doing, while some of the indicators show that people are a little bit nervous about the economy. Others show that people are giving him a chance. And remember, we're only less than halfway through the honeymoon period that they afford most presidents, right? The ancient proverbial first 100 days. I think we're on day 47 or 48 or something like that. And yet Trump doesn't get that opportunity, does he? Well, I have some audio from CNN discussing Trump on the economy. Listen to this.
The economy, of course, remains an issue top of mind and of concern for most Americans, likely only getting more top of mind and more of concern. What are Americans saying in this poll about how they think the president is handling all of this, with a relevant note that this poll began and ended before the massive stock market sell-off that we've seen this week?
Yes, but not before the chaos we've seen over the last 3 weeks.
Exactly.
And I think that is reflected in the numbers here. You are right. The economy is issue number one by far for Americans, as indicated in this poll. His approval rating on this issue is 44%. Trump's disapproval rating, 56% of Americans disapprove of his handling of the economy. We've never seen him that far underwater and upside down in terms of approval and disapproval on this issue.
So CNN painting the picture here that things are not well with the economy. And listen, when you see the stock market getting a little volatile, I get it. But is the blame fairly on Trump? I would say no. We've talked about why we were seeing the sell-offs in the stock market and all of that turmoil. And Trump indicating today that he's not concerned with the volatility in the market. And I think he's 100% right on this. Why should he? This is the fallout of what we saw happen with the end of term spending that Biden committed to and put into effect. We're seeing the term good money after bad, right? Don't throw good money after bad. That's what we're seeing, right? I think Secretary Bessent put it well as a detox. I say it's kind of like taking a dump and getting the bad stuff out of our system. This has to pass, right? We have inflated dollars. We have government spending. We have T-bills that are being purchased by the Fed. We have a lot that needs to work its way through, and we're seeing it work its way through. And I think that's the only way to do it. Without that, we're in bad shape. So what Trump is doing, in effect, is, I think, the right thing to do. And he's optimistic about it. Listen to Trump in the White House today talking about the tremendous optimism we have about his cuts on regulation, cuts on taxes, and where we go from here.
Financially, we'll be stronger than ever before. I think the markets are going to soar when they see what's happening. I'll tell you what, I'm called every day by numerous big companies. I spoke at the Business Roundtable yesterday. They had the largest attendance they've ever had. And these are only the CEOs and chairmen, but mostly the people that run the boss, the people that run the top 150 companies. 150 people showed up. Every single company showed up. First time it ever happened. It's been around a long time. The biggest business leaders. We had a great discussion. It went really well. And I want to tell you, there's tremendous optimism out there about our country in terms of regulations being cut, in terms of taxes being cut. And it would be great if the Democrats would do what's right. It would be great if the Democrats would do what's right for our country for a change, because they really are there. They've lost their way.
The Democrats have lost their way. I agree with that. And I also agree with the optimism that is to come. I think all this doom and gloom is, you're going to see, it's not going to amount to a whole lot. I think things are going to bounce back pretty well and pretty lovely, because Trump isn't reinventing the wheel. He's doing what he did the first time around when The median household income went up by like $6,500 per family. He had tax cuts that were very effective. We saw jobs growing. There was so much job growth during the Trump administration. I'm talking about everywhere I went, people were looking for jobs, for employees. There were sign-on bonuses, right? Because there was so much demand, because people were investing in their companies, saying, hey, we're going to sell more. We need more. We need to do more. Instead, we're seeing layoffs, but in the right places, right? Layoffs in the government are probably a good thing. Bottom line, I think when Trump says the golden era of America has begun and the best is yet to come, I think he's 100% right. And all we have to do is just look at prior performance. Now, I know they always tell you prior performance is not an indicator of, your current investment. Okay, got it. But in this case, I think we're going to see exactly that. There's nowhere to go but up, in my opinion. Some people think the world is falling, that we're going to see a global reset of the economy. You might see a global reset of the economy from where we are and going straight up. But there is no sense in tearing things down. And this is for the few in the audience that believe that you have to destroy what you have in order to start over. I don't believe that. I don't believe if you have problems in your family, you destroy your family and get a new family. I believe you work with the family you have. And I believe the same way with the economy. You don't destroy the economy to rebuild the economy. You don't do that. You take the economy and you make it better. You make it more robust. There's no sense, if your house is on fire, you focus on putting the fire out. And if you have to knock it down, you knock it down. But you don't say, hey, the house is on fire, let's knock it down. It doesn't work that way. It really doesn't. So those are my thoughts, and I wanted to make sure I'm on the record with those, because as everybody in CNN and everybody else out there wants to paint this picture that it's doom and it's gloom, I say the best is yet to come. Now, you wouldn't know a lot of this if you weren't listening to the radio, right? Because some of this, if you're watching CNN, you're getting the information they give you. But I try to give you an alternative to what CNN is giving you, what MSNBC is giving you, because they want to give you one side of the story. I give you their side of the story, and then I give you my side of the story so that you can make your own opinion. And to me, this is why radio is important. You might get some of it on TV, but with shorter segments on television, they're only about 6 minutes long, a lot of those segments, and you got to share them if you're on there with a host or another guest. You're down to a couple of minutes. But in radio, we've got time. We've got time to really explore these things, to bring in a guest and keep them for 1, 2, 3 segments, to really dig into. If we got to spend the whole hour, we will. Because I want you to know what's going on. And this is why I love talk radio. And if you love talk radio, podcasts, the news, you have to have the best radio. The C. Crane CC Radio 3. It delivers exceptional spoken word audio. The clarity makes it feel like your favorite host, me, is right there in the room with you. The CC Radio 3 pulls in long-range AM/FM stations with incredibly clear reception, and it includes emergency features like NOAA weather and the 2-meter ham band. It runs on included power that comes with a cord, or a set of batteries that gives you over 170 hours. The CC Radio 3 is the almost everything radio. So listen to your favorite podcasts like mine, your favorite shows, music, with Bluetooth from any smartphone or smart speaker. To order one, here's what you do. You ask for the CC Radio 3 and call C. Crane's customer service based right here in the U.S., 800-522-8863, 1-800-522-8863, or visit ccrane.com/rich. I'll spell it out for you. That's ccrane.com/RICH. Use code RICH, R-I-C-H, at checkout for orders that are over $75, and you'll save 10%.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. The best guests, the best opinions. This is America at Night with Rich Valdez.
All right, amigos, welcome back. And, every now and again, I love to call out the crazy commies. And there's a crazy commie out there communist sympathizer Randi Weingarten. She's the teachers union president, and she usually doesn't make any bones about how communist she is and her sympathies towards their movement. But she was out there yet again saying some pretty crazy things. Listen to this.
That actually is opportunity. So when somebody says DEI, it's opportunity. It's so we can create that ladder of opportunity. It's so we can make sure that kids can succeed. Poor kids, kids with disabilities, kids who want to go to career tech ed, kids who are first generation college goers to get some scholarship money. That's what the Department of Education does. And that's why you're seeing across the country people saying 90% of the kids in America go to public schools. Yes. They know what Title I is. They know what IDEA is. The federal government does not control education. The states do. Local school boards do. This is about opportunity. That is why so many people are so mad about it, because they're just taking opportunity away from kids that don't have it. So billionaires, kids of billionaires, they have it. They go to private schools. Everyone else, 90%, go to public schools. Don't take away their opportunity.
This is an incoherent diatribe by this woman that I have to say, it didn't even make sense. She didn't sway my opinion. Now, I happen to be, unlike her, I would venture to say she didn't grow up as poor as I did. I grew up really poor to my Puerto Rican parents in Brooklyn, New York, and then we made our way to the suburbs of New Jersey, Hudson County, New Jersey. And I remember a very tough comeuppance, if you will. And listen, I didn't need any DEI to make it anywhere, right? It gives you grit. It gives you the desire to work and to strive for what you don't have. But Randi Weingarten wants to make it seem like if you're poor, it's some sort of curse. And if we don't give you some sort of shortcut, you can't make it. And in reality, I'd say with the shortcut, you're never going to make it because you'll never be competitive and you're not really competing for what you're worth. So I want to get to the bottom of this with the president of the American Principles Project, which you know is the lobbyist for Big Family. Terry Schilling, welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich. I'm excited to be here.
So you heard Randi Weingarten's shrill, shrieking response to the abolition of DEI from the federal government. I'm sure it doesn't come as a surprise to you, but your thoughts?
Well, look, first and foremost, there is not going to be any education funding cuts to public schools from the downsizing of the Department of Education. The money is still going to get delivered to public schools. It just won't be having all the strings attached to it that the Department of Education attaches to every single dollar that the federal government gives out in education funding. Randi Weingarten is inherently dishonest. She's been caught in so many lies, it's hard to keep track. But the reality is that the reason that we're demolishing the Department of Education is because it has destroyed public schools. It has made them bloated. Half of every single dollar that is spent on education in America is not sent to the classroom. It is sent to bureaucrats, administrators, and counselors, people that don't teach our kids how to read and write and do math. And that explains a lot. It explains, in part, why only 1/3 of America's children can read or do math at grade level. The Department of Education was instituted in 1979, and it has not just stalled educational progress, it has devastated educational progress. So we're doing this because we want to return power of education back to the states, because we're concerned about how bad public schools have fallen behind under the Department of Education. Her whole argument is dishonest, it's deceitful, and we shouldn't expect anything else from these radical left-wing special interest groups. The Department of Education, it doesn't serve parents, it doesn't serve children, it doesn't even serve teachers. It serves union bosses like Randi Weingarten.
I think that's really well put. And the union always serves its other union bosses. They say that they serve the teachers, but really it seems like they serve politicians, Terry Schilling. It's never the students.
No, that's right. Look, think about this. The unions peaked, right? They peaked in the 70s and 80s, and then they declined. what have the unions done to stop the manufacturing outpouring, right? What have they done to stop offshoring and all the jobs that have gotten shoved overseas to China and Mexico? They haven't stopped any of that because the union leaders didn't care. They were all getting fat. They were all getting comfy. They were all insulated from all of the cuts and the downsizing that American manufacturing is undergo and all of the trades have had to undergo. They're comfy. They're high on the hog. They live in Washington, D.C. They don't live in Chicago or Moline, Illinois, where I'm from. They are insulated from all of these cuts, and the unions suck. They are so bad.
Yeah, that should be a T-shirt right there. The unions suck. They are so bad. It's so true, and they definitely. And while they're there to serve teachers, I mean, the disservice that they do to children, I think, is incredible. Now, straight ahead, I want to pivot the conversation to what you guys do best, right? I think the American Principles Project and many others, but you guys are up there with many that are shouting and clamoring for parental rights, in particular in education. And I think school choice is something I've been passionate about for a very long time. I helped found a charter school back in 2011, 2012. And it's because I believe that parents need additional rights, additional resources, because every kid deserves a quality education, and we shouldn't be held captive by the union and what the union thinks that we should do or what the state government thinks we should do. So that being said, there's a push. There's always been a push, but I feel like there's a renewed push for more parental rights. What do you see changing on that front?
Well, I think that there's been a huge pushback ever since, you'll probably remember this, and I think your audience will probably remember this, but back in 2021, there was a Virginia governor's race, and there was a debate between Glenn Youngkin, who's now the governor of the Republican governor of Virginia, versus Terry McAuliffe, who was a Democrat. And in this debate, this was the pivotal moment in that debate, and I think ultimately it was the pivotal moment for the return of education back to being controlled by parents. But Terry McAuliffe was asked about the schools and what was going on there, and he said the famous line, infamous line, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach." Now, Rich, if you think about this, in 1979, when the Department of Education was first founded, no politician would have ever said that because it was so crazy. It was so foreign to how people thought. And in fact, the Department of Education has been part of building that mentality amongst not just the political class, but amongst teachers and amongst the teachers' unions. They really don't think that parents have any right to tell schools what to teach. They believe that these educational experts that go and get college degrees and read about education in books, they know best.
Well, Terry Schilling, I want to pick up right there. When we return, I want to talk about, does the Department of Education last? Will it be abolished? Will it not? And your thoughts on the Trump administration's initiative to support school choice. So, folks, we're coming right back with Terry Schilling from the American Principles Project and me, Rich Valdez. Don't move a muscle.
I want to listen to you, Rich, all the time.
America at Night with Rich Valdez.
What we want to do is always school choice, but we're going to do school choice, and we're doing it. But we want education to be moved back where the states run education, where the parents of the children will be running education, where governors that are doing a very good job will be running education, not run. I drive through the city and I see like so many buildings, Department of Education, Department of big buildings, and by the way, they're empty. Nobody shows up to work. So I think Linda did a very good job.
That, of course, President Trump today in the White House discussing the need and importance of school choice. And, of course, Linda McMahon, the newly confirmed Secretary of the Department of Education, saying that she's taken this job hopefully to work herself out of a job. I want to get some reaction to that from the president of the American Principles Project, Terry Schilling. Welcome back.
Thanks so much for having me, Rich.
So we left off with your thoughts on school choice and the infamous, horrible words spoken by McAuliffe in the debate with Youngkin, the gubernatorial debate some years ago. And I think it's, the quiet part out loud, right? It's really the true belief of a lot of, at least big government Democrats, that feel that we know better than you.
No, that's exactly right. They don't want parents involved. They look at parents as a problem, as a hurdle that these educational experts in Washington, D.C. need to jump over in order to properly educate students. And it's just backwards. But ever since that moment in the debate where Terry McAuliffe said, I don't think parents should be telling schools what to teach, was the turning point. And that ultimately is what's led to Donald Trump getting elected. This whole thing, you got to go back to that point in time because the Joe Biden administration, his DOJ, was colluding with the State School Boards Association to go after parents that were upset at the school boards as domestic terrorists. Right? They were weaponizing the government against parents who wanted to clean up the schools. But the goal with demolishing the Department of Education is actually to fix public education. There are too many strings attached from Washington, D.C. and bureaucrats here. There's too much money going to bureaucracy at the local level and not enough going into the classroom. The whole point here is to get a lot more money. It should be 90-10. 90 cents out of every dollar should be going to the classroom, and 10% should be going to overhead, also known as bureaucracy. That's how any functional and healthy organization works, and that's what getting rid of the Department of Education, I think, will ultimately do by returning this back to the states that actually have to manage their budgets, that actually have to be responsible with what they put forward when it comes to education commitments. This is going to clean up the public education system more than anything. It's not a handout to anyone besides the most vulnerable. We have to clean up our public schools. 90% of kids are always going to go to public schools. That's just how it's always going to work because there's way more of them. So we've got to clean up the public schools and get them to where they can actually get our kids above a 33% average for reading comprehension and math abilities.
Really well put. Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project. And I want to talk a little bit now about the future of all of it, right? We've pushed back on DEI, on gender ideology. We're pushing back on parental choice and allowing parents to have the role that they deserve in kids' education. What's the next obstacle that is going to be, I guess, in the sights in the culture war, and where do you see us going?
Well, listen, there's going to be a lot of turmoil now. With the Department of Education going away and power going to the states, now the activists, the parents, are actually going to have to work with their state legislators, who, by the way, are a lot more accessible than their members of Congress, right? Like, there's so much easier. You have a local office in your town where you can go meet with your Democrat or Republican state representative, and they're pretty nice people and they're pretty reasonable. They're a lot more bipartisan than the guys in D.C. So we've got to start cleaning up the schools at the local level. There's also this thing with higher education, right? These serious problems with higher education. We're sending way too many kids to college and not enough kids into the trades, into the people that actually keep our country running, the plumbers, the electricians, the pipe fitters, the carpenters, the people that build this country. We're not making enough of them, right? So we've got to start resetting the entire higher education system and the post secondary education system. If we don't, then we're going to keep having problems. So we've got to do that. And look, these kids, college is so expensive now. It's $50,000-$60,000 a year for state schools in some states. So we've got to make sure that kids aren't strapping themselves onto boatloads of debt where they can't pay it off. But look, I really think that getting rid of the Department of Education is going to lead to a lot of prosperity, and it's going to unleash a new golden age for the education system in America. Kids will be able to read again. It's great.
Amen to that. Terry Schilling, president of the American Principles Project. Let everybody listening know how they can keep up to speed with the amazing work you guys are doing.
Oh, well, look, we're a big family, right? So in D.C., there's big pharma, big oil, big tobacco. They all represent their interests. We represent families. We're big family. So you can check us out online at AmericanPrinciplesProject.org or follow me on X or Instagram, all the social media accounts. My handle is Schilling1776, SCHILLING 1776.
Outstanding, brother. Well, Godspeed to you. Thanks for the visit, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Rich.
You bet, Terry. And amigos, your calls and more coming up right now. It's Open Phones Across America. We'll be right back.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
After the guest leaves every night and we're doing open phones, kind of at the heartbeat of America. And you sit there in this radio studio and suddenly you hear voices. Mobile, Dallas, New York, Miami. And there's kind of a conglomeration of America all in one room.
Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S.
All right, amigos, to the phones we go, 833-4-VALDEZ. Let's go to Joe giving us a call from Bethel, Connecticut, WLAD. Joe, go right ahead, sir.
Good evening.
All right, Joe, I'm going to put you on hold just so you can lower your radio. I'm going to come right back to you. Joni, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Go right ahead.
Yes, I would like to know when Trump has released his report about the drones and the UFOs, and I'd like to recommend a guest for you, Luis Alexandrio. He is a government expert, or used to be, and maybe soon will be. Trump has mentioned about having him in charge of one of his departments involving the drones and the UFOs.
Yeah. Well, as far as I know, the White House did release a comment on it saying this was not the enemy, that the New Jersey drones that we'd seen all over New Jersey and Northeast were approved by the Federal Aviation Association. That's from straight from Caroline Leavitt, the White House press secretary. And I believe that it was her very first White House press briefing in the briefing room where she addressed members of the media, indicating that they were not the enemy, but were authorized flights for research and other reasons. Do I know more what of those other reasons are? No. And I've also not seen a report, but I've also not looked for a report. But she did indicate that I'm going to, I guess keep us up to speed on that or whatnot. So we'll see if there's any part two to that. But it seemed to be put to bed, so to speak, Joni. And thank you, by the way, for the suggestion on the guest. We appreciate it. Joni in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, KDKA. Wendy Bell country, by the way. Shout out to Wendy Bell, great patriot. And we continue. Let us go now to Joe. Joe is in Bethel, Connecticut, WLAD. Joe, go right ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Valdez.
Buenas noches. How are you?
I want to thank you for broadcasting the pulse of the nation. I like Ike. I admire Trump, and I have great hopes for Rich Valdez.
Well, to be included amongst Eisenhower and Trump is quite an honor, Joe. I appreciate your compliment. Those are very, very kind words. And I try my best to just bring you whatever I'm seeing happening in the world. So it's very kind of you. And honestly, I can't do it without you, without Joe and Joni and everybody out there, Peter in Canada. There's so many people that tune into this program. And without you, I'm talking to myself.
Well, thank you, Mr. Valdez.
It's an honor and a pleasure. God bless you. Thank you, Joe. I really appreciate that. You're a good man. And thank you for calling. Call anytime, and I hope you'll call back again really soon. Let's go to, well, before we go to Canada, I guess I'll take a pause right here, and we'll come back, and then we'll go to Montreal, Canada, and check in with Peter. Don't go anywhere.
This is America at Night with Rich Valdez. Call now, 833-4-VALDEZ. That's 833-482-5337. 833-4-VALDEZ. That's Valdez with an S. He's brown, he's bald, and he's breaking it down. It's America at Night with Rich Valdez.
Well, Sarah, this isn't a matter of opinion. This is a matter of fact. First, yes, when President Trump came in, President Biden had left him an economy with steady growth, with all-time high stock markets, and with inflation coming down. President Trump, over and over on his campaign trail, in his inaugural speech, and in his address to Congress last Tuesday, said, I'm going to make America affordable again. He said on day one he was going to bring prices down. Prices haven't come down. In fact, by slapping tariffs on Canada and Mexico, he's raised prices on things from the lumber that we use to build housing to the fruits and vegetables that Americans buy at the grocery store.
That's Senator Chris Coons on CNN today. And I think he's wrong. Personally, I think that we're not seeing prices on everything go up. I think we're starting to see things start to trickle down. But, of course, he can cherry pick some examples of these things and try to make a case. But I would make the argument that even the prime minister of, or what's his name? Yeah, the premier, whatever his job is, the guy from Ontario who was talking tough, eventually backed down and said, we're not going to do that, saying let cooler heads prevail and whatnot. But it was really, can we really get into this fight and win? And it's politics. You probably should win the fights you get into, because if you lose them, you're going to lose more of them. Anyway, I want to get your thoughts on this. Let's hit the phones. Peter from Canada is on the line listening to WVMT out of Vermont. Peter, go right ahead, sir.
Yes, good evening, Rich. Great to talk to you, and a great
Likewise.
show, and a great station, WVMT. Boy, it's like Radio Free Europe for Canadians. But I digress. Listen, apropos of this tariff thing and your first hour guest from Breitbart, financial editor, one thing I want Americans to understand is, look, this is a big election year in Canada. And so whenever you see Canadian politicians and all this ridiculous Canadian nationalism coming up and these idiots who dare boo the American national anthem at hockey games, ignore them. You know, it's a big election year. We're getting rid of Trudeau. The next guy who's coming in is just as bad, if not worse, as a Liberal leader, so hopefully he's going to lose. But I want to, Americans like Doug Ford in Ontario, he's a conservative. And he's caught, the Conservatives in Canada, they're caught between a rock and a hard place, because you've got the Liberals and the left media, just like fake news in the USA, no different.
Yeah.
And these clowns are exploiting and fanning the flames of Canadian nationalism, appealing to the dummies and, Donald Trump's the 51st state. And they make a big deal out of it. And they're trying to exploit this anti-Trump propaganda to rally people to the liberal side. The problem the conservatives have, on the other side of things, is that they have to be seen to be defending Canada. If they come out and say, hey, listen, you stupid Canadians, I can say that, I'm a Canadian. Listen, you fools, a strong America does not mean a weak Canada. Right. A strong America is great for Canada. I mean, it's not a win-lose duality. And it's just like the Liberals to try to play one group against the other, divide and conquer. Now these fools are trying to divide Canadians from Americans for political gain, because we have that big federal election coming up. And, the guy who's replacing Trudeau now, I got to tell you a very quick thing here. He's a founding board member of the World Economic Forum. So these are the globalists, George Soros, Klaus Schwab, et cetera, who are going to be running against, these are guys who just want to succeed Trudeau, who was part of that team too. So they're just changing the shirt, there's no change or no real change. But you have to, I have to be sympathetic to these Canadian politicians who are, pro-American and, hey, listen, I'm a Canadian. I love the United States. Thank God Donald Trump got elected. I wish he was my prime minister, Rich.
I love that.
Because, where the world was going, we have to see all this. I think everybody in the world has to realize it's this, behind the scenes, this globalist cabal, if you will, the Soros, the Schwabs, and all the other ones who don't wear uniforms and who don't, come out of the woodwork. They're calling the shots. Trudeau is their puppet. Mark Carney, the new leader of the Liberal Party, same thing. Biden, the Democrats, Kamala Harris, Macron in France, they're all, this is a thing. And thank God, I wouldn't want to live in this world, frankly. I'm not dying soon enough had Donald Trump and Elon Musk and God bless Caroline Leavitt, had not, and so many others, I leave everybody out, Tulsi, et cetera.
Sure.
So thank God. This was so needed in the world. Trust me, Americans, as a Canadian, I can see it. And I don't have a dog in your fight. I'm just looking at this. I've seen it. I've seen it on social media. I thank God for people like Rich Valdez. I'm not sucking up, Rich, but you and all the other great voices I hear on WVMT. It is so important. I trust Donald Trump. I just bought some more shares today and so on. So I think he's a godsend. We have to stay the course. Don't take Canadians too seriously. They have to. As I say, we have to be seen to be standing up for Canada, so that the Liberals and the left don't turn around and steal it.
Well, I get that.
Rich,
go ahead.
This is where we're coming from. Another thing too. America was founded on the three words: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Okay, more than three words, but. Yeah. Canada's found, we're not the same type of stand-up, independent type of people. We're the loyalists of Britain. We lost, so we're compliant. We're much more compliant and easy to push over. But we need a strong America. That's what the world needs.
I agree with that. And listen, I really appreciate everything you said. Very kind of you. And Peter, your analysis, I think, is spot on. And I get it. Just like, we like to hear America first here, Canadians want to hear Canada first. And people should have strength in their sovereignty and resolve for the homeland. I'm with that. And I think the way you put it was probably the best. A strong America doesn't mean a weak Canada. And I think if that part remains a constant in the national dialogue, we'll all do better. Sadly, like you said, the left within the media, they come at it from every angle, distorting the facts every step of the way. Peter, Montreal, Canada, WVMT, thank you for the call. Amigos, that's it for me tonight. Hasta la próxima. Take care. Good night, and God bless you, America. And if you're in some parts of the country, you get me for one more hour, my friends. One more hour. Take care. Good night. God bless you, America. I'm Rich Valdez.